The lonely mechanic saw 3 shivering children at his old gas station. When they visited him in the hospital months later, everyone realized what had actually happened that rainy night. Harold Jenkins wiped his hands on the old rag hanging from his belt loop. The metal workbench in his garage held the same socket wrench set he'd owned for 30 years, tools scattered across its surface like abandoned soldiers. His fingers moved automatically, returning each piece to its proper place in the red metal box. "Time to close up," he muttered to no one. Thunder rumbled outside. Harold's knees cracked as he straightened up, his body protesting after hours of working on his own car. The garage light buzzed above him, casting harsh shadows on the concrete floor. He checked his watch. 6:45 p.m. Right on schedule. The first drops of rain hit the driveway as Harold pulled down the garage door. The mechanism squealed. He'd been meaning to oil it for weeks. His house sat dark behind him, empty except for the constant ticking of the kitchen clock his wife Mary had picked out 20 years ago. Harold's pickup truck waited in the driveway, its faded blue paint peeling around the wheel wells. He climbed in, his hip complaining about the familiar motion. The engine coughed once, twice, then settled into its usual rough idle. "Come on, old girl," he said, patting the dashboard. The truck had seen better days, just like him. The drive to Pete's gas and service station took exactly 7 minutes, same as it had when Harold worked there. The wipers squeaked across the windshield, struggling to keep up with the increasing rain. Street lights flickered on as the storm clouds darkened the early evening sky. Harold pulled into his usual spot, away from the pumps but with a clear view of the station. The neon "Open" sign reflected in the growing puddles, its red glow mixing with the fluorescent lights overhead. He watched the evening rush of customers hurrying between their cars and the convenience store, collars turned up against the rain. Another exciting night, he said to himself, settling into the familiar routine. Through the station's windows, he could see Tom, the new manager, restocking the cigarette display. Young guy, maybe 35. Thought he knew everything about running a station just because he had a business degree. Harold remembered when Pete hired Tom 2 years ago, right after Harold's retirement. Pete had passed away 6 months later, leaving Tom in charge. The rain drummed harder on the truck's roof. Harold's hands tightened on the steering wheel, muscle memory from decades of driving in storms. A semi-truck roared past on the highway, sending up a spray of water. His mind drifted back to his days as head mechanic. He could still feel the weight of the heavy tool belt around his waist, smell the mix of gasoline and oil that never quite washed out of his clothes. The satisfaction of diagnosing a problem, of fixing something broken. "Need any help?" he'd ask customers sometimes, when he noticed them staring confused under their hood. Most just waved him off now. Who'd trust some old guy hanging around a gas station? A flash of lightning lit up the lot. Harold counted automatically. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, until the thunder cracked overhead. The storm was getting closer. Through the streaked windshield, he watched a rusty Honda Civic pull into the station, engine coughing worse than his truck. The car limped toward pump number 4 before shuddering to a stop, steam rising from under the hood despite the rain. The driver's door opened. A woman jumped out, pulling her jacket over her head. She yanked open the back door, leaning in to talk to someone. Harold squinted through the rain. There were kids in the back seat, 3 of them, small figures huddled together. The woman sprinted toward the station store, nearly slipping on the wet pavement. Tom looked up as she entered, his face settling into the expression Harold had seen too many times before. The back door of the Honda opened. 3 little girls climbed out, identical as paper dolls. They couldn't have been more than 6 years old. Their matching pink backpacks stood out against the gray evening as they sat down on the curb by pump 4, trying to stay under the metal overhang. The rain pounded down harder. Harold watched the girls huddle closer together, their hair already soaked. One of them pointed at a puddle forming near their feet. Another wrapped her arms around her knees, making herself small against the wind. Inside the store, Harold could see the woman gesturing frantically as she talked to Tom. Tom's arms were crossed, his head shaking. Harold knew that stance. Nothing good ever came from it. "Not my problem," Harold muttered, trying to convince himself. He'd seen plenty of people stuck at this station over the years. Wasn't his job anymore to help everyone who broke down. Lightning flashed again, closer this time. The smallest girl jumped at the thunder, grabbing her sister's hand. Their mother was still inside, her desperation visible even through the rain-streaked windows. Tom walked away from the counter, leaving the woman standing there. She pulled out her phone, fingers shaking as she dialed. Harold could read the defeat in her shoulders. The girls were shivering now, their thin summer clothes no match for the storm. The middle one tried to share her backpack as a makeshift umbrella with her sisters. Harold's hands clenched the steering wheel tighter. Mary's voice echoed in his head. Sometimes God puts us where we need to be. She'd always been better at this sort of thing, knowing when to step in, what to say. Tom emerged from behind the counter, heading for the door. Harold recognized the look on his face. He'd seen it too many times, always directed at certain customers. The kind of look that said you weren't welcome here. Damn it, Harold muttered. His door was open before he could talk himself out of it, the rain hitting his face as he stepped out into the storm. His bad knee protested as he straightened up, but he ignored it. The girls watched him approach, 3 pairs of identical brown eyes tracking his movement. Up close, he could see they weren't completely identical. The one on the left had a small scar above her eyebrow, the middle one's hair was slightly shorter, and the one on the right wore butterfly clips. Evening, Harold said, stopping a few feet away. Looks like you could use some help. The store's door chimed. Tom stepped out, his face darkening when he saw Harold. Inside, the girl's mother pressed her phone to her ear, tears mixing with the rain on her face as she watched through the window. Thunder crashed overhead. Harold took another step forward, his decision made. Sometimes you had to be the answer to someone else's prayer, Mary used to say. Harold hadn't understood that. Not really, not until this moment. The rain kept falling, but he didn't feel it anymore. He had work to do. The smallest girl scooted closer to her sisters as Harold approached. Rain dripped from his baseball cap, creating a puddle around his work boots. Tom's footsteps slapped against the wet pavement behind him. Jenkins, Tom called out. These folks were just leaving. Harold kept his eyes on the girls. That your mom in there? He asked, gesturing toward the store. The middle sister nodded. A raindrop rolled off her nose. Car trouble. Harold already knew the answer, but he needed them to trust him. It made a funny noise, the one with the butterfly clips said. Like growling. Jenkins, Tom said, closer now. Station policy. Can't have people loitering. Harold turned slowly, feeling his hip protest. Since when? Since I made it policy. Tom stood with his hands on his hips, rain darkening his polo shirt. Look, I got paying customers to worry about. The store's door chimed. The girl's mother hurried out, phone clutched in her hand. She positioned herself between Harold and her daughters. I'm sorry, she said. We'll go. I just needed to make some calls. Harold said, keeping his voice gentle. I used to be the mechanic here. Mind if I take a look? She hesitated, glancing at her daughters, then at Tom. I can't afford repairs right now. Let me at least tell you what's wrong. Harold took off his cap, ran a hand through his thinning gray hair. No charge for looking. Tom made a disgusted sound. You don't work here anymore, Jenkins. You can't just. You want a broken-down car blocking your pump all night? Harold asked without looking at him. The woman's shoulders slumped slightly. I'm Lisa, she said. These are my girls. I'm Trina, the one with butterfly clips announced. Tamara, said the middle sister. Trinity, whispered the smallest. Harold nodded to each of them. Harold Jenkins. Pop the hood for me. Lisa fumbled with her keys, hands shaking from cold or stress or both. The hood released with a metallic clunk. Girls, get back in the car where it's dry, she said. But Mom, Trina started. Now, please. The triplets shuffled to their feet, sneakers squishing on the wet pavement. They climbed into the back seat, immediately pressing their faces against the window to watch. Harold lifted the hood, propping it open with the rusty support rod. The engine was still warm, steam rising into the rain. He pulled a small flashlight from his pocket, old habits die hard, and shined it over the belts and hoses. How long's it been making that noise? He asked Lisa. A few days. It got worse tonight. Harold nodded, reaching in to check the alternator belt. The rubber crumbled under his fingers. There's your problem. Alternator's shot. Is that expensive? Lisa's voice cracked on the last word. Behind them, Tom cleared his throat loudly. We close in an hour. Harold ignored him, focusing on Lisa. Parts and labor? At a shop, probably 400. Minimum. Lisa's face fell. She glanced at the girls in the car, then back at Harold. I don't I can't. Mom! Trina's voice was muffled through the glass. Can he fix it? He looks like he knows about cars. Yeah, Tamara added, fogging up the window with her breath. He has tools like the guys on TV. Harold patted his worn tool belt. Been fixing cars longer than you've been alive. 30 years here at Pete's, he added to Lisa. Before Tom took over. Tom stepped closer, rain dripping from his chin. Which means you know you can't work on customer vehicles without proper insurance. Liability issues. Like Pete cared about insurance, Harold muttered. Memory flashed through his mind. Pete showing him the ropes that first day, back in '82. People need help. You help them, Pete had said. Rest is just details. Lisa touched Harold's arm gently. Thank you for looking. We'll figure something out. She turned to Tom. If I could just use your phone to call a tow truck, pay phones out front, Tom said flatly. Harold felt something hot and angry rise in his chest. He'd seen this scene play out before, too many times. Different faces, same story. He'd always kept quiet, kept his head down, done his job and gone home. But Mary's voice echoed in his head again. Silence is a choice, too. I can fix it, he said suddenly. Lisa and Tom both stared at him. I've got an alternator that'll fit in my truck. Employee discount on the belt. He looked directly at Tom. Unless that's changed too. You're not an employee anymore, Tom snapped. Pete promised me lifetime discount. Got it in writing when I retired. Harold hadn't thought about that paper in years, tucked away in his toolbox. Want to see it? Tom's jaw worked silently. In the car, the girls had rolled down their window despite the rain. What's an alternator? Trinity asked, pronouncing each syllable carefully. It's what keeps your battery charged, Harold explained, turning toward them. Like a bicycle generator, but for a car. Cool. Tamara's eyes widened. Can we watch you fix it? Absolutely not, Lisa said quickly. Mr. Jenkins, I appreciate the offer, but, Harold, he corrected, and the part's just collecting dust in my garage. Might as well put it to use. Lisa wrapped her arms around herself, shivering in her thin jacket. I can't pay you. Didn't ask for payment. Jenkins, Tom said, voice hard. A word. Harold turned to face him fully. In the fluorescent lights, Tom's face was all sharp angles and shadows. You want to play charity mechanic? Do it somewhere else, Tom said quietly. This isn't a shelter. No, Harold agreed. It's a service station. Says so right on the sign Pete put up 30 years ago. They stared at each other, rain falling between them. Harold could feel Lisa watching, could sense the girl's eyes on them through the car window. Finally, Tom threw up his hands. Your funeral. But if anything goes wrong, yeah, I know the drill. Harold turned back to Lisa. Give me 20 minutes to get the part from my truck. Lisa looked at her daughters, then at her dead car, then back at Harold. Her shoulders straightened slightly. Why are you doing this? Harold thought of all the times he'd watched scenes like this play out. All the times he'd looked away, gone back to his work, told himself it wasn't his problem. Because it's raining, he said simply. And your girls are cold? In the car. Trinity pressed her small hand against the window. Harold saw his own reflection in the glass, distorted by rain and fluorescent light. An old man in a wet baseball cap, tool belt hanging low on his hips. Not much to look at, but maybe enough for tonight. 20 minutes, he repeated to Lisa. That's all I'm asking. She nodded slowly. Okay, 20 minutes. Harold turned toward his truck, feeling Tom's glare on his back. The rain was falling harder now, but he barely noticed. His hands itched for tools, for work, for something he could fix. Behind him, he heard Trina's excited voice. Mom, can we learn about cars too? Sometimes, Harold thought, the biggest problems had the simplest solutions. Sometimes all it took was someone willing to get wet. Harold's boots splashed through puddles as he walked to his truck. The alternator sat heavy in its box behind the seat, wrapped in an old towel. He'd meant to sell it online months ago, but something had always stopped him. Lightning split the sky as he carried the part back. The thunder followed immediately, making Trinity jump in the backseat. Through the window, Harold saw her sisters grab her hands. It's okay, he heard Tamara say. Remember what Mom says about thunder. Angels bowling, Trinity whispered. Lisa stood under the station's overhang, wringing her hands. Mr. Jenkins. Harold, are you sure about this? In this weather? Done it in worse. He set the alternator down carefully. Girls want to learn about cars, right? Trina's face pressed against the window. Can we really watch? Lisa shook her head. It's pouring rain. Got an umbrella in my truck, Harold said. Big enough for all three. Please, Mom, the girls chorused. Lisa looked at the sky, then at Harold. They'll get soaked. Already are, Harold pointed out. Might as well learn something. A small smile cracked Lisa's worried expression. 10 minutes. Then back in the car. The girls tumbled out, Trina already asking questions. What tools are those? Why do you have so many? Can I hold one? Harold handed Tamara his umbrella. You're in charge of keeping your sisters dry. She stood straighter, taking the responsibility seriously. The umbrella was almost as big as she was, but she managed to hold it over all three of them. First rule of mechanics, Harold said, opening his toolbox. Safety. He pulled out 3 pairs of safety glasses, kept there since his teaching days at the trade school. Little small, but they'll work. The girls giggled as they put them on, the adult-sized glasses slipping down their noses. Second rule, Trina asked. Know what you're fixing. Harold pointed to the alternator. See how the belt's all cracked? That's why your car was making that growling noise. Trinity touched the broken belt with one finger. It's all scratchy. Rubber gets old, just like people. Harold started removing the old alternator. His fingers moved automatically, muscle memory from thousands of similar repairs. But unlike people, we can replace the worn-out parts. Lisa watched from under the overhang, her phone clutched in her hand. I've been trying to save up for repairs, she said quietly. But with the rent increases. Harold grunted as he worked a stubborn bolt loose. Housing market's rough these days. We've been looking for a new place. Further from the girls' school, but cheaper. Lisa's voice caught. Tonight was another dead end. The girls were focused on Harold's tools, comparing the different sizes of wrenches. They didn't seem to notice their mother's tone, but Harold did. City's changing, he said. Not always for the better. Lightning flashed again. Trinity flinched, but kept her eyes on Harold's hands as he worked. Why'd you stop working here? Tamara asked suddenly. Harold paused, wrench halfway through a turn. Got old. Joints don't work like they used to. But you're fixing our car, Trina pointed out. Some things are worth a little joint pain. The old alternator finally came free. Harold set it aside, showing the girls the worn components. See these brushes? They're supposed to be smooth. Trinity leaned in close, safety glasses slipping further down her nose. They look sad. That's one way to put it. Harold began installing the replacement part. Rain ran down his neck, soaking his shirt collar. Your mom's doing a good job, you know. Taking care of 3 of you by herself. Tamara looked up at him. Did you have kids? 1. Girl about your mom's age now. Harold tightened a bolt, not meeting their eyes. Don't see her much these days. Why not? Trina asked. Trina, Lisa warned from under the overhang. That's not polite. It's okay. Harold reached for the new belt. People get busy. Lives go different directions. Thunder rolled again. Closer now. Tom appeared in the store window, tapping his watch pointedly. Almost done, Harold called, though he doubted Tom could hear him through the glass. Lisa stepped forward, rain darkening her hair. Girls, back in the car. Let Mr. Jenkins finish up. But Mom, no buts. You've already stayed out too long. The girls shuffled toward the car, umbrella wobbling as they moved. Trinity stopped, turning back to Harold. Thank you for fixing our sad car, she said solemnly. Harold's hands stilled on the belt. You're welcome, sweetheart. The car door closed behind them. Lisa lingered, watching Harold work. I don't know how to repay you, she said softly. Already did. Harold nodded toward the car. Those girls of yours. Way they look at the world. Reminds me of someone. Your daughter. My Mary. Harold finished tightening the belt. She would have liked them. Always said kids see things clearer than adults do. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Is she? 2 years now. Harold closed the hood gently. Cancer. I'm so sorry. Harold shrugged, but his shoulder felt tight. Life goes on. That's what she'd say. He wiped his hands on his jeans. Try starting it up. Lisa slid behind the wheel. The engine turned over immediately, purring smoothly. The girls cheered from the backseat. He fixed it. Trina's voice was muffled through the glass. Mom, He really fixed it. Harold gathered his tools, trying to ignore the ache in his knees. Give it a few minutes to charge the battery. Then you should be good to go. Lisa got out, leaving the engine running. I don't know what we would have done if. Don't need to know. Harold closed his toolbox. Just take care of those girls. Still. Lisa hesitated, then pulled a business card from her purse. I work at the diner on 5th. If you ever want coffee, it's on me. Harold took the card, tucked it carefully in his pocket. Might take you up on that. The store's door chimed. Tom stepped out, keys jingling. Closing time, folks. Lisa hurried back to her car. The girls waved frantically from the back seat as she pulled away, their faces bright behind fog glass. Harold watched until their taillights disappeared into the rain. His joints ached, his clothes were soaked, and his tools would need cleaning. But for the first time in 2 years, the night felt a little less empty. Tom locked the store's door, not looking at Harold. Don't make this a habit. No promises. Harold picked up his toolbox. Some habits are worth keeping. The rain was letting up as he walked to his truck. Behind him, the station's lights clicked off one by one, leaving only the neon open sign glowing in the darkness. Not a bad night's work, he thought. Mary would have approved. In his pocket, Lisa's business card felt like a small weight, anchoring him to something he'd almost forgotten existed. The simple act of helping someone who needed it. Thunder rumbled in the distance, moving away now. Harold smiled slightly as he started his truck. Angels bowling, indeed. Harold lay awake in his bed, listening to the rain drum against the roof. The alarm clock on his nightstand read 2:17 a.m. His hands still smelled like motor oil, even after scrubbing them twice. He rolled onto his side, wincing at the protest in his shoulder. Mary's side of the bed remained neat, untouched. The moonlight through the window cast shadows on her pillow. Did the right thing today, he muttered to the empty room. Didn't I? Sleep refused to come. At 3:45, he gave up and shuffled to the kitchen. The linoleum felt cold under his feet as he made coffee, muscle memory guiding his hands in the dark. The morning paper arrived at 5 o'clock, landing with a wet thud on his porch. Harold read it twice, trying to focus on the words instead of the memory of 3 small faces watching him work. By 6:30, his usual morning routine felt wrong, empty somehow. He stood in his garage, staring at the workbench where the alternator had sat for months. The empty space bothered him more than it should. Getting soft, he told himself, but he found himself checking his wallet anyway. Enough cash for some snacks, maybe a few bottles of water. Just in case. The grocery store was quiet this early. Harold pushed his cart past the cereal aisle, pausing at the display of granola bars. What did kids eat these days? He picked up a box, studying the ingredients. Mr. Jenkins. He turned at the familiar voice. Lisa stood there in a waitress uniform, dark circles under her eyes suggesting her night had been as sleepless as his. Early shopping? She asked. Harold gestured awkwardly with the granola bar box. Just picking up some things. Mom. Trina's voice carried down the aisle. Can we get? She stopped short, eyes widening. It's the car man. Her sisters appeared behind her, all 3 still in pajamas under their coats. Trinity clutched a worn stuffed rabbit. Girls, inside voice, Lisa reminded them. To Harold, she added, we're grabbing breakfast before school. The car's running perfectly, by the way. Glad to hear it. Harold shifted his weight, suddenly aware of how out of place he must look in the cereal aisle with a box of kids' snacks. Tamara pointed at his cat. Are those for us? Tamara, Lisa said sharply. We don't ask for things. Wasn't sure what kind you liked, Harold said, ignoring Lisa's protest. He held out the box. These any good? The girls crowded around, examining the package. They have chocolate chips, Trinity announced. And nuts, Trina added. Mom, can we? Lisa's face tightened. Mr. Jenkins doesn't need to. Got a grandson about their age, Harold lied smoothly. Can't eat them all myself. It wasn't exactly a lie. He did have a grandson. Somewhere in Seattle with his daughter. 7 years old now. Or maybe 8. The Christmas cards had stopped coming last year. Lisa's expression softened slightly. That's very kind, but, please. Trinity looked up at her mother with wide eyes. He fixed our car. That he did. Lisa sighed. What do we say? Thank you, the girls chorused. Harold added a few more boxes to his cart, pretending not to notice Lisa's discomfort. "How's the housing search going?" The question made her shoulders tense. "Not great. Everything's either too expensive or—" She glanced at the girls, who had wandered to look at the colorful cereal boxes. "Not in the best areas." Harold nodded, understanding what she wasn't saying. "Tough market. We'll figure something out." Lisa checked her watch. "Girls, we need to go. You have school, and I have work. Can Mr. Jenkins come to breakfast?" Trina asked. "Honey, I'm sure he has plans." Actually, Harold found himself saying, "Could use a cup of coffee." The diner was only half full when they arrived. Lisa led them to a corner booth, the girls sliding in with the easy familiarity of regular customers. "Usual table?" Harold asked as he sat down. Lisa handed out menus. "The morning shift helps me keep an eye on them while I work. Cheaper than daycare." A waitress with gray hair piled high brought coffee without being asked. "These your granddaughters?" "Lisa." "No, Janet. This is Mr. Jenkins. He helped us with car trouble last night." Janet's eyes narrowed slightly. "The one from Pete's station?" "Used to be," Harold said, adding sugar to his coffee. "Retired now." "He." Janet's tone suggested she had more thoughts on the matter, but she kept them to herself. "Regular breakfast for the girls." Trinity tugged Harold's sleeve. "They make smiley face pancakes." "That's so." Harold studied the menu. "Guess I'll have to try them." Lisa started to protest, but Harold waved her off. "Been a while since I had breakfast company." The girls chatted as they ate, telling Harold about their school, their favorite subjects, the class hamster named Mr. Whiskers. He listened, surprised by how easily they included him in their conversation. And then, Tamara said around a mouthful of pancake, "Ms. Rodriguez said my drawing was the best." "Chew first, talk second," Lisa reminded her. She hadn't sat down, moving between their table and her other customers with practiced efficiency. Harold cut his pancake into careful bites. The chocolate chip smile stared up at him, reminding him of similar breakfasts years ago. His daughter at this age, demanding Mickey Mouse shapes in her pancakes. "Mr. Jenkins." Trinity's voice pulled him back. "Are you sad?" "Trinity," Lisa called from across the room. "Remember what we said about personal questions?" "It's fine." Harold dabbed his mouth with a napkin. "Just remembering something, that's all." "Was it about your Mary?" Trina asked quietly. The fork stilled in Harold's hand. "Yeah," he said finally. "She liked breakfast for dinner. Said it made ordinary days special." Lisa appeared with the coffee pot, refilling his cup. "Girls, finish up. Bus comes in 20 minutes. They scraped their plates clean, then slid out of the booth. Each one hugged Lisa quickly before grabbing their backpacks. "Bye, Mr. Jenkins," they called as they headed for the door. "Hold up." Harold pulled 3 granola bars from his jacket pocket. "For lunch." They took them carefully, looking to their mother for permission. Lisa nodded slightly. "Remember your manners," she said. "Thank you." They ran out, the bell above the door jingling in their wake. Lisa watched them through the window as they joined the other kids at the bus stop. They don't usually warm up to strangers so quickly. "Good judges of character," Harold said. "Like their mother." She turned back to him, wiping her hands on her apron. "Why are you really helping us?" Harold stared into his coffee cup. The surface reflected his tired face, the gray stubble he hadn't bothered to shave. "Maybe I needed the help too," he said finally. Lisa squeezed his shoulder gently as she passed. "Coffee's on the house. Come back anytime." Harold paid his bill, leaving a tip that made Janet's eyebrows rise. Outside, the morning sun had burned away the storm clouds. He drove to Pete's station out of habit, but didn't stop. Tom's truck was parked in the spot where Harold used to leave his toolbox during breaks. Instead, he went to the auto parts store, bought some new belts, filters, basic repair supplies. The clerk didn't question why a retired mechanic needed a fresh stock of parts. At home, Harold cleared space in his truck's toolbox. The granola bars and water bottles fit perfectly in the empty compartment. Just in case, he told himself. But he slept better that night than he had in months. Harold sat in his truck outside the public library, watching Lisa and the girls through the window. They were hunched over a computer terminal, Lisa pointing at apartment listings while the girls took turns with the mouse. He hadn't planned to follow them here. But after breakfast at the diner, when he'd overheard Lisa telling Janet about checking rental listings, his truck had somehow turned itself toward the library. Trinity spotted him first, waving frantically through the glass. No choice now but to go in. The library air conditioning hit him as he entered, reminding him of how Pete used to keep the station office freezing cold. Lisa looked up from the screen, surprise crossing her face. "Mr. Jenkins? What brings you here? Thought you could use an extra set of eyes." He pulled up a chair, joints creaking. "Been in this town 40 years. Know which landlords are worth dealing with." Tamara scooted her chair closer. "Mom found 3 places we can look at." "That's so." Harold leaned toward the screen, squinting at the listings. His stomach tightened at the addresses. "That third one? What's the cross street?" "Maple and 23rd, Lisa said. "It's a little far from their school." "But, no." Harold's voice came out sharper than he intended. "Not that neighborhood." Lisa's fingers stilled on the keyboard. "The rent's within our budget. There's a reason for that." Harold softened his tone. "Pete used to get called out there for breakdowns. Wouldn't send his drivers after dark." Trinity clutched her ever-present stuffed rabbit tighter. Trina and Tamara exchanged worried looks. "What about this one?" Harold pointed to a different listing. "Over by the old hardware store." "Too expensive." Lisa's voice was flat. "Everything in that area is." Harold scratched his chin, feeling the stubble he'd forgotten to shave again. "Guy who owns the building used to bring his fleet trucks to Pete's. Might be able to put in a word." "Mr. Jenkins." Lisa turned to face him fully. "I appreciate what you're trying to do, but I can't keep accepting help." "Mom," Trina interrupted. "Look at this one. It has a playground." The listing showed a modest apartment complex. Clean, if a bit dated. Harold recognized the building. He'd done some work on the maintenance guy's car last year. "Mike Rodriguez still managing that place?" he asked. Lisa nodded slowly. "You know him? Fixed his transmission. Owes me a favor." Harold pulled out his phone, a flip model that made the girls giggle. "Mind if I make a call?" Lisa glanced at her daughter's hopeful faces. "I suppose not." Harold stepped away to make the call, his voice a low rumble by the reference section. When he returned, his weathered face held a hint of satisfaction. "He's got a 2-bedroom opening up next week. Previous tenants moving early. Said he'd hold it if we go look now." "Now?" Lisa checked her watch. "I have work in 2 hours." "Perfect. Plenty of time." Harold was already standing. "Girls can come too. See their potential new home." "Please, Mom," the girls chorused. Lisa's resistance crumbled. "Let me print these other listings, just in case." The apartment was on the 2nd floor, accessible by both stairs and a well-maintained elevator. Mike met them in the lobby, greeting Harold with a firm handshake. "Jenkins, how's retirement treating you?" "Can't complain." Harold nodded toward Lisa. "Friend of mine needs a good place. Thought of you." Mike's eyes traveled over Lisa and the girls, assessing but not unkind. "The unit needs a fresh coat of paint, but otherwise it's ready to go." The apartment was small but clean. Sunlight streamed through large windows, warming the worn carpet. The girls immediately ran to explore, their excited voices echoing off bare walls. "Mom, there's a big closet. Look at the view. Can we paint our room purple?" Lisa walked through more slowly, checking water pressure, testing light switches. Her face gave nothing away, but Harold saw how her hands lingered on the solid countertops, the sturdy cabinet handles. "Rent's $9.50, Mike said. First and last month's deposit." Lisa's shoulders tensed. Even with Harold's recommendation, that was a steep amount up front. "About that transmission work," Harold cut in. "Never did bill you properly." Mike raised an eyebrow. "That's so. Figure it's worth at least a month's rent." Harold met Mike's eyes steadily. "Plus paint supplies." A long moment passed. Mike glanced at the girls, now sitting in the empty living room, planning where their beds would go. "Transmission work," he said finally, nodding. "Right. Guess that would cover the deposit." Lisa started to protest, but Harold touched her arm gently. "Sometimes pride costs more than it's worth," he said quietly. Tears welled in her eyes. She blinked them back quickly. "The girls' school, bus stops right out front," Mike supplied. "Route 23. And I can give them rides when the weather's bad," Harold added. "Got nothing but time these days." Lisa looked around the apartment again. Trinity had found a spot by the window, sunlight making her face glow. Tamara and Trina were measuring the bedroom with their footsteps, arguing about furniture placement. "When can we move in?" she asked finally. Mike pulled out rental forms, soon as the paperwork's done. "Later," After deposits were arranged and forms were signed, they stood in the parking lot. The girls hugged Mike's legs, thanking him for their new home. "Jenkins," Mike called as they turned to leave. "Still owe you for that transmission." Harold waved him off. "Call it even." They were halfway to the diner when Lisa pulled into a gas station. Not Pete's, one of the new corporate chains. "Girls, wait here with Mr. Jenkins. I need to make a call." She walked a few steps away, phone pressed to her ear. Harold could see her shoulders shaking. "Is Mom okay?" Trinity asked quietly. "Yeah, sweetheart. Sometimes people cry when they are happy. Like when you fixed our car." Harold swallowed hard. "Something like that." Lisa returned, eyes red but smiled genuine. "Called work. Told them I'd be late. Who wants lunch?" "Can Mr. Jenkins come?" Trina asked. "Actually," Harold said, "need to stop by Pete's. Got something to take care of." The station was quiet when he arrived. Tom looked up from his phone as Harold entered. "We've got to stop meeting like this, Jenkins. Won't be long." Harold's voice was steel under cotton. "Just wanted to tell you something." Tom sighed dramatically. "Look, if this is about your charity cases, those charity cases are moving into Mike Rodriguez's complex. You know, the one right behind here." Harold stepped closer to the counter. "Meaning they'll be regular customers. Might want to adjust your attitude." "Is that a threat?" "Just facts." Harold turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and Tom? Pete may be gone, but his name's still on that sign. Might want to remember what that means to people around here." He drove home through familiar streets, past the library, past Mike's apartment complex, past the diner where Lisa would be starting her shift. In his garage, he began organizing his tools with new purpose. Some habits were worth keeping. After all, some changes were worth making. His phone buzzed, a text from Lisa. A photo of the girls holding up their new apartment keys, faces split with identical grins. Harold smiled, saved the picture, and got back to work. The pain started small, a twinge in Harold's chest as he helped Lisa and the girls move boxes up to their new apartment. He ignored it, blamed it on lifting, on age, on the summer heat. "Last box," he announced, setting down a container marked kitchen in Trinity's careful handwriting. His breath came shorter than it should have. "Mr. Jenkins." Tamara studied his face. "You look tired. Just need to sit a minute." He lowered himself onto a stack of boxes, trying to hide how his hands shook. Lisa paused in her unpacking. "Maybe you should take a break. You've done more than enough." "I'm fine." Harold waved her off, but the movement sent another spike through his chest. "Just out of practice with moving day." "When's the last time you moved?" Trina asked, sorting books into piles. 30 years ago, when Mary and I bought our house." The pain eased slightly. Harold straightened up, never saw reason to leave. Trinity appeared with a glass of water, her small face serious. "Mom says you have to stay hydrated." Harold took the glass, noticing how the water trembled with his hand's subtle shake. "Smart woman. Your mom." The apartment was coming together. Second-hand furniture from thrift stores filled the spaces, and the girls had already covered their bedroom walls with drawings. The morning sun streamed through windows Lisa had washed 3 times, determined to make everything perfect. "Still can't believe we're really here," Lisa said softly, placing plates in a cabinet. "A month ago, I thought." She didn't finish, but Harold understood. A month ago, they'd been barely hanging on, living in a neighborhood that made Lisa check the locks twice every night. The chest pain returned, sharper this time. Harold stood carefully. "Better head home. Got some work to do." "But you're coming to our housewarming dinner, right?" Trina asked. "Mom's making spaghetti. Wouldn't miss it." He ruffled her hair, ignoring how his arm protested the movement. Lisa walked him to his truck. "You've done so much. I don't know how to. Stop thanking me." Harold's voice came out gruffer than intended. "Just take care of those girls." She touched his arm. "You really don't look well. Should you be driving? Been driving these streets longer than you've been alive." He managed a smile. "See you tonight." The drive home took longer than usual. Harold's vision blurred at the edges, forcing him to pull over twice. The pain in his chest spread to his left arm, a sensation he recognized but didn't want to name. His garage welcomed him with familiar shadows and oil smells. He'd just rest a minute, then get cleaned up for dinner. The phone rang, startling him awake. How long had he been sitting in his truck? "Jenkins." His voice rasped. Mr. Jenkins? Trinity's voice. Mom wants to know if you still like garlic bread. We're at the store. Harold checked his watch. Nearly 5 p.m. He'd slept 3 hours in his truck. Love garlic bread, sweetheart. Tell your mom. The pain surged suddenly, stealing his breath. The phone slipped from his fingers. Trinity's voice came tinny through the speaker. Mr. Jenkins? Are you okay? He fumbled for the phone, but his left arm wouldn't cooperate. Black spots danced in his vision. Mr. Jenkins. Now he heard fear in her voice. Mom! Something's wrong with Mr. Jenkins. Lisa's voice, distant but sharp. Trinity, give me the phone. Harold tried to respond, but the garage tilted sideways. His chest felt like it was being crushed in a vice. Harold! Lisa's voice grew urgent. Harold, can you hear me? Where are you? Garage, he managed. Can't. Breath's not right. I'm calling 911. Stay on the line. Harold heard her telling someone else to take the girls to the car. Heard Trinity crying in the background. The pain wrapped around his ribs like steel bands. Talk to me, Harold. Help is coming. Tell me about Mary. Tell me about when you met her. He forced words through clenched teeth. Gas station. Her car broke down. Like us. Lisa's voice stayed steady, but he heard tears behind it. Tell me more. Alternator. Just like yours. The garage lights flickered. Or maybe that was his vision. She said I was her answer. Sirens in the distance. Getting closer. Harold? Stay with me. The ambulance is almost there. He thought he heard small voices in the background. Is Mr. Jenkins going to be okay? Trinity, baby, get in the car. We're going to the hospital. Hospital. Mary had hated hospitals. All those machines. Those white walls. The garage door opened. Uniformed figures appeared. Moving too fast. Asking too many questions. Sir, can you tell me your name? Harold Jenkins. Lisa's voice answered from the phone. 70 years old. Possible heart attack. No known allergies. How did she know that? Had he told her? BP's dropping. Let's move. The world tilted, spun. Faces appeared and disappeared. Someone took his phone. We've got him. Meet us at County General. Cold metal under his back. Oxygen mask over his face. The garage ceiling sliding away. Hang on, Harold. Lisa's voice, fading. The girls need you. We need you. He tried to answer, but darkness took him first. Beeping machines. White walls. The smell of antiseptic. Harold opened his eyes slowly, finding himself in a hospital room. Night pressed against the windows. How long had he been here? Something moved beside his bed. Trinity's stuffed rabbit sat on the nightstand, keeping watch. About time you woke up? Lisa sat in a chair by the wall, dark circles under her eyes suggesting she'd been there a while. Girls! His voice cracked. At the neighbors. They wanted to stay, but... She stood, poured water from a pitcher. You scared us, Harold. The events came back slowly. The pain, the garage, the ambulance. Sorry about dinner, he mumbled. Lisa helped him sip water through a straw. Moderate heart attack, the doctor said. Could have been worse if Trinity hadn't been on the phone with you. Harold closed his eyes. Shouldn't have worried her. She's stronger than you think. They all are. Lisa's voice hardened slightly. But they've lost enough people in their lives. Don't you dare add to that list. Yes. He tried to smile, but it came out as a grimace. The doctor wants to keep you for observation. And then, Lisa hesitated. You'll need help. At home. Been taking care of myself just fine. Like today. She crossed her arms. The girls are already planning a schedule. Trina's making a chart of who brings you lunch each day. Harold's chest ached, but not from the heart attack. Don't want to be a burden. Funny. Lisa's voice softened. That's exactly what I said to you. That night at the gas station. Memory flashed. 3 small figures in the rain. A broken-down car. A decision that changed everything. Different situation, he protested weakly. Is it? Lisa adjusted his blanket with practiced hands. Sometimes pride costs more than it's worth. Someone wise told me that recently. Harold looked at Trinity's rabbit, keeping its silent vigil. They really want to help. They love you, Harold. We all do. Lisa squeezed his hand gently. Let us be your answer this time. Outside the window, dawn began to paint the sky. A new day, a second chance. Harold closed his eyes, feeling tears slip down his weathered cheeks. Okay, he whispered. Okay. The hospital room's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Harold stared at the ceiling, counting the tiles for the 100th time. 48 complete tiles, 3 partial ones cut to fit against the wall. The morning nurse had already been in twice to check his vitals. Mr. Jenkins. A different voice this time. Dr. Chen, according to her badge. How are you feeling this morning? Ready to go home? Harold tried to sit up straighter, wincing at the movement. Let's talk about that. She pulled up a chair, flipping through his chart. You live alone. Got my house. My garage. The words sounded hollow even to him. Been managing fine. Until you had a heart attack in that garage. Dr. Chen's voice was gentle but firm. Any family nearby? Harold looked away. Through the window, he could see the hospital parking lot filling up with early visitors. Got a daughter in Seattle. Haven't spoken in 8 years. A new voice from the doorway made them both turn. Sarah Jenkins stood there, her business suit wrinkled from travel. Her hair was shorter than Harold remembered, streaked with gray she'd probably inherited from him. Dad! She stepped into the room, her heels clicking on the linoleum. You look terrible. Nice to see you too. Harold's chest tightened, and not from the heart attack. Dr. Chen looked between them. I'll give you a moment. The door closed behind her. Sarah remained standing, her hands clutching her purse like a shield. How'd you know? Harold asked. Hospital called. I'm still your emergency contact. She moved to the window, looking out rather than at him. Why didn't you tell me you were having heart problems? Wasn't. Harold picked at his blanket. Just happened. Things like this don't just happen, Dad. Sarah turned, and for a moment he saw Mary in her face. There are warning signs. Before he could answer, the door burst open. Trinity ran in, clutching a new drawing. She stopped short at the sight of Sarah. Oh, sorry, I didn't. It's okay, sweetheart. Harold found himself smiling for the first time that morning. Come show me what you made. Trinity approached cautiously, glancing at Sarah. She held up her drawing. Harold's truck, carefully rendered in crayon, with 3 small figures sitting in the bed. It's us when you take us for ice cream, she explained. See, I drew your toolbox too. Sarah's eyebrows rose. Dad? Who is this? I'm Trinity. Mr. Jenkins fixed our car and helped us move and comes for spaghetti dinner and... She stopped, noticing Sarah's expression. Are you his daughter? The one from Seattle. The door opened again. Lisa hurried in, slightly out of breath. Trinity, honey, I told you to wait. She saw Sarah and stopped. Oh, I'm sorry. We didn't mean to interrupt. No interruption. Harold held out his hand and Trinity took it, squeezing his fingers. Sarah, this is Lisa and Trinity. Lisa's got 2 other girls, Trina and Tamara. They're family. Sarah's face went through several expressions before settling on confusion. Family? He saved us, Trinity said simply, when our car broke down in the rain. And then he helped us find a good place to live. And now we help him too. Lisa stepped forward, offering her hand. You must be Sarah. Your father talks about you. Sarah shook her hand automatically. Wish I could say the same. The tension in the room thickened. Trinity pressed closer to Harold's bed. Girls made you cards, Lisa said, breaking the silence. She pulled out a stack of construction paper from her bag. The nurses said we could put them up. Trinity immediately began arranging them on the wall by Harold's bed. Each one featured a different crayon scene. Harold's truck, the gas station, their new apartment building. Sarah watched, her expression unreadable. How long have you known my father? About 2 months. Lisa met her gaze steadily. But sometimes that's all it takes. 2 months. Sarah's laugh held no humor. 2 months in your... what? His new family? Sarah. Harold's voice came out stronger than he expected. Don't what? Dad? Question why you've apparently adopted strangers while your own grandson hasn't seen you in years. Trinity's lower lip trembled. Lisa put a hand on her shoulder. Maybe we should go, she said quietly. No. Harold tried to sit up further, ignoring the pain in his chest. Sarah, you left. You chose Seattle, chose your life there. That was your right. But don't you dare come in here and judge what I've built since then. Built? Sarah's voice rose. You're a retired mechanic hanging around a gas station, playing grandpa to 3 little girls who love him. Lisa cut in. Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. To 3 children who light up when he visits, who make him eat vegetables, who noticed he was sick before he did. To a family that chose him, and that he chose back. Silence fell. Trinity had stopped arranging cards, her small shoulders tense. Sarah sank into a chair, suddenly looking tired. I don't understand. All these years, you never reached out. Never tried to. Neither did you. Harold's voice softened. We both made choices, Sarah. Both lived with them. Trinity approached Sarah cautiously, holding out one of her cards. I drew your dad's truck. See the tools in the back? He teaches us about fixing things. Sarah took the card, her hands trembling slightly. He used to teach me too. On Sunday afternoons, in the garage. Really? Trinity's face brightened. Did you learn about alternators? Those are my favorite. A ghost of a smile touched Sarah's lips. Timing belts? Actually, Dad said they were like the heartbeat of the car. Speaking of heartbeats, Dr. Chen said from the doorway, making them all jump. Time for your medication, Mr. Jenkins. Sarah stood, smoothing her suit. I should check into my hotel. I'll come back later. It came out as a question. Harold nodded. Bring pictures of Tommy. Girls would like to see their cousin. Sarah's eyes widened slightly at the word. She nodded once, then hurried out. Dr. Chen administered Harold's medication while Lisa helped Trinity finish arranging the cards. The wall bloomed with color, each drawing a moment frozen in crayon time. Your daughter seems. Lisa paused, searching for words. Complicated, Harold finished. Like her old man. Trinity climbed carefully onto the bed, mindful of Harold's 4 lines. Is she going to take you to Seattle? Harold's heart monitor beeped steadily. No, sweetheart. My home's here. With my family. Lisa's eyes glistened. The girls are making a schedule for when you come home. Trina's very organized about it. Just like Mary was. Harold smiled at the memory. She'd have loved all this. The chaos, the noise, the love. Mr. Jenkins. Trinity's voice was small. Are you crying? Maybe a little. He wiped his eyes with his hospital gown sleeve. Happy tears. Like your mom had when we found the apartment. Outside, a car horn honked. Lisa checked her watch. That's Mrs. Rodriguez. She's watching the girls while I'm at work. Go. Harold squeezed Trinity's hand. I've got cards to look at, and Sarah's coming back later. Trinity hugged him carefully. We'll bring you real food tomorrow. Hospital food is yucky. Don't I know it? He watched them gather their things. Lisa, thank you for what you said to Sarah. Just told the truth. She smiled. Rest. Doctor says maybe home in a few days. After they left, Harold studied the wall of cards. Each one told a story. The night at the gas station, moving day, ice cream trips in his truck. A life he never expected, drawn in bright crayon colors. His heart monitor beeped steadily, counting out seconds of this new reality. Sarah would come back later, with pictures and complications and maybe, just maybe, a chance to rebuild. But for now, Harold had cards to memorize, and a wall full of love to keep him company. Harold's living room had never been so full of life. Trina stood on a chair, hanging a welcome home banner made from printer paper and markers. Tamara arranged pillows on the couch, just like the physical therapist showed us, while Trinity supervised from her perch on the arm of Harold's old recliner. Girls, careful with that chair, Lisa called from the kitchen, where something that smelled like chicken soup simmered on the stove. It's fine, Mom. Trina adjusted the banner's angle. Mr. Jenkins needs decorations to feel better. Sarah watched from the doorway, holding a box of her father's belongings from the hospital. Her face held the same expression it had worn all week, somewhere between bewilderment and reluctant amazement. They've really taken over, haven't they? She murmured. Harold, settled in his recliner under strict orders not to move, smiled. You should see them on spaghetti night. The front door opened, and Mike Rodriguez walked in carrying Harold's new medical supplies. Where do you want these, Jenkins? Bedroom's fine. Harold started to rise, but 3 small voices immediately protested. The doctor said no getting up. Trinity rushed to push him gently back into the chair. You have to rest, Tamara added firmly. We made a chart. Trina pointed to a color-coded schedule taped to the wall, detailed down to medication times and daily walks. Sarah set down the box and moved closer to study the chart. This is incredibly thorough. Trina's very organized, Lisa explained, emerging from the kitchen wiping her hands on a towel. Gets it from her father, I think. He was an engineer. A shadow crossed Lisa's face, there and gone so quickly Harold almost missed it. But he'd learned to read the signs, the way her shoulders tensed slightly, how her hands twisted the towel. Was? Sarah asked softly. Car accident, 3 years ago. Lisa's voice stayed steady, practiced. Just the girls and me since then. Sarah's expression shifted, understanding dawning. She glanced at her father, then back at the girls. And now we're family, Trinity declared, climbing onto the arm of Harold's chair again. Right, Mr. Jenkins? Right, sweetheart? Harold patted her hand. Sarah brought something for you girls, didn't you? Sarah started, then remembered. Oh, yes. She dug in her purse, pulling out her tablet. Pictures of Tommy, your cousin. The girls crowded around as Sarah pulled up photos of a boy about their age, grinning with missing front teeth. He looks like you, Mr. Jenkins. Tamara pointed at Tommy's smile. Same crinkly eyes. Jenkins jeans, Sarah said softly. Strong ones. Mike emerged from the bedroom. Medical supplies are all set up. Oxygen tanks good to go, just like they showed us at the hospital. Thanks, Mike. Harold shifted in his chair, trying to find a comfortable position. His chest still ached, a constant reminder of how close he'd come to losing everything. I made lasagna, Lisa announced. It's in your freezer, portioned out. Girls will heat it up when they come for lunch duty. You don't have to, Harold began, but Sarah cut him off. Yes, they do. She crossed her arms, looking so much like her mother that Harold's breath caught. Because that's what family does. Right, Dad? Harold looked around his living room, at the handmade banner, the carefully arranged pillows, the color-coded chart. At Lisa in his kitchen, cooking enough food to feed an army. At Mike, who'd taken time off work to help set up medical equipment. At his daughter, finally home after 8 years. Right. He managed past the lump in his throat. Mom, Trina called from the tablet. Tommy plays baseball too. Can we email him? Sarah's eyes met Harold's. I think Tommy would like that. Maybe we could even visit sometime. Seattle's pretty far, Tamara said doubtfully. Not that far. Sarah sat on the couch, making room for the girls to join her. And I hear you like road trips in your grandpa's truck. The word hung in the air for a moment. Harold felt Trinity's small hand slip into his. Is that okay? She whispered. If we call you Grandpa. Harold squeezed her fingers gently. More than okay. Lisa appeared with bowls of soup on a tray. Lunchtime. Doctor said you need to keep your strength up. I can help feed him. Trinity volunteered. I can feed myself, Harold protested, but nobody paid him any attention. Sarah watched as Trinity carefully spooned soup, making airplane noises that had Harold alternating between laughter and embarrassment. You know, she said quietly to Lisa, I haven't seen him laugh like that since Mom died. First time I saw it was when Tamara tried to explain TikTok to him. Lisa smiled at the memory. He looked so confused, but he couldn't stop grinning. I still don't understand it. Harold grumbled around a spoonful of soup. Nobody does, Dad. Sarah pulled up another picture on her tablet. Oh, here's Tommy at his school play. He was a tree. A tree. Trina peered at the photo. We're doing Wizard of Oz at our school. I'm going to be a munchkin. When's the play? Sarah asked. Next month. Tamara bounced on the couch. You should come see it. Sarah glanced at Harold. Maybe I will. Tommy has a break from school then. Mike cleared his throat from the doorway. Better get back to work. Call if you need anything, Jenkins. Thanks, Mike. Harold raised his soup spoon in salute. For everything. After Mike left, Lisa began gathering her things. I've got the late shift at the diner. Girls, Mrs. Rodriguez will pick you up at 6. But Mom, no buts. Grandpa needs rest. Lisa stressed the word slightly, testing it out. You can come back tomorrow, according to the chart. The girls hugged Harold carefully, mindful of his chest. Trinity left her stuffed rabbit on the side table. To keep you company, she explained. After they left, Sarah sank into the vacated couch space. They really love you. Love's easy when you're 6. Harold set down his soup bowl. It's us adults who complicate things. Dad. Sarah twisted her wedding ring. I'm sorry for staying away so long. Me too. Harold looked at the banner overhead, the careful child's letters spelling out welcome. Guess we both needed a wake-up call. A heart attack is a pretty dramatic one. Sarah's attempt at humor fell flat. I was so angry for so long. About Mom, about the distance, about everything. I know. Harold shifted in his chair. Was easier to let the silence grow than try to bridge it. And then you found them. Sarah gestured at the room, the evidence of the girl's presence everywhere. Or they found you. Bit of both, maybe. Harold smiled. Mary always said God works in mysterious ways. Through broken-down cars and rainstorms. Through second chances. Harold reached for his daughter's hand. Think we could try for one of those? Sarah squeezed his fingers, her grip strong like her mother's had been. Already started, Dad? They sat in comfortable silence, watching the afternoon sun paint shadows on the wall. The banner fluttered slightly in the breeze from the window, and somewhere in the distance, a school bus honked its horn. Tommy really would love them, Sarah said finally. The girls. His cousins. Family's family, Harold said. Whether it comes by blood or broken alternators. Sarah laughed, a real laugh this time, one that reminded him of her childhood. Only you, Dad, would find a new family at a gas station. Found your mother at one too. Remember? I remember the story. Sarah stood, stretching. I should check into my hotel. Coming back tomorrow, according to the chart. Harold nodded at the wall. Apparently I have physical therapy at 10, then lunch with Tamara at noon. Mind if I join? Never. Harold watched his daughter gather her things. Sarah? Thank you. For coming. She paused at the door, her smile wobbling slightly. Thank you for still being here when I did. After she left, Harold sat in his quiet house, looking at Trinity's rabbit keeping watch from the side table. The color-coded chart caught his eye, filled with love disguised as schedules and tasks. His chest still ached, but differently now. A good ache, like a muscle finally stretching after being too long contracted. Family, he thought, came in all sorts of packages. Sometimes it just took a broken heart to see it. Harold's first walk to the elementary school playground felt like running a marathon. 6 weeks after his heart attack, his body still protested at the smallest exertion. But the doctor had insisted on daily exercise, and the girls had turned it into their personal mission. Slow and steady, Tamara coached from his left side. Like fixing a transmission. That's not how you fix a transmission, Trina corrected from his right. Right, Grandpa? The word still made his heart skip, not in the dangerous way it had before, but in a warm, gentle flutter that felt like healing. Both take patience, he said diplomatically. Trinity skipped ahead of them, her backpack bouncing with each step. The playground came into view, chain-link fence surrounding aged but well-maintained equipment. A few other parents and grandparents lined the fence, watching the recess activities. This is where we play at lunch, Trinity explained, pointing through the fence. See the red slide? That's our favorite. Harold leaned against the fence, catching his breath. The late summer air hung heavy with humidity, but he didn't mind. Being outside beat staring at his living room walls. Jenny's mom says you're not really our grandpa, Tamara said suddenly, her voice small. Harold's hands tightened on the fence. What do you think about that? I think Jenny's mom is stupid, Trina declared. Family isn't just blood. Mom says so. Your mom's right. Harold watched a group of kids chase each other across the playground. Families who loves you, who shows up when you need them. Like you did, Trinity said. In the rain. Like you did for me too. Harold touched his chest, where the surgical scar was still healing. When I was sick, a bell rang inside the school. Kids began streaming toward the doors, their voices echoing across the playground. That's us. Tamara hugged Harold quickly. See you after school. Sarah's bringing Tommy to visit. Remember? He ruffled her hair. We'll all get ice cream. The girls ran off, joining the line of students entering the building. Harold watched until they disappeared inside, then began his slow walk home. The gas station stood on his route, its familiar outline drawing his eye. The sign still read Pete's, but something was different. The windows looked cleaner, and fresh paint covered the old rust spots on the pumps. A new car sat in his old parking spot, not Tom's truck, but a sensible sedan. Through the window, Harold saw an unfamiliar face behind the counter. A young woman with bright red hair, arranging displays. The door chimed as he entered. Cool air conditioning hit his face, carrying the same mix of coffee and gasoline he remembered. "Can I help you?" the woman asked. "Just looking." Harold studied the changes. New coffee machine, updated snack selections, fresh floor tiles where the old ones had cracked. "Oh, you must be Mr. Jenkins." The woman smiled. "I'm Rachel, Tom's replacement." Harold's eyebrows rose. "Replacement?" Corporate finally listened to customer complaints. Rachel shrugged. "Something about discriminatory practices? Anyway, I'm the new manager. Tom's been reassigned." A smile tugged at Harold's mouth. "That's so. The locals keep telling me stories about when you worked here." Rachel gestured at the garage bay, now clean and organized. "Said you were the best mechanic in town. Long time ago." Harold walked to the window, looking out at where he'd first seen three small figures in the rain. "Different time. Maybe not so different." Rachel followed his gaze. "Still helping people, from what I hear. Those three little girls who come in for snacks? They talk about their grandpa the mechanic all the time." Harold's chest warmed. "Do they now?" "Said you taught them about cars." "The middle one, Tamara? She wants to be a mechanic too." "Better career than sitting around gas stations in retirement," Harold said, but he couldn't hide his pride. The door chimed again. A minivan pulled up to the pumps, smoke rising from under its hood. Rachel sighed. "Don't suppose you'd want to take a look? My mechanic's out sick." Harold checked his watch. 2 hours until Sarah and Tommy's flight landed. His chest felt strong today, his breathing easier than it had in weeks. "Got my tools in the garage at home," he said. "Could make a call." 10 minutes later, Mike's truck pulled up with Harold's toolbox in the back. The minivan's driver, a young mother with 2 car seats in the back, looked close to tears. "Alternator shot," Harold told her after a quick check. "Lucky for you. I've got experience with those." Rachel watched from the doorway as Harold worked, his movements slower than they used to be but still sure. Mike helped where needed, handing tools and making notes for parts. "Thought you retired," Mike said quietly as they waited for the new alternator to charge. Harold looked at the garage bay, at the spot where he'd first helped Lisa and the girls. "Some things you never really retire from." The minivan's driver tried to pay him, but Harold waved her off. "Just help someone else when they need it," he said. "That's payment enough." He was washing his hands in the garage sink when his phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Flight landed early. Tommy's excited to meet his cousins." Another text followed, this one from Lisa. "Girls can't stop talking about ice cream with their cousin. Thank you for bringing our families together." Harold dried his hands slowly, looking around the garage. New equipment mixed with old memories, change blending with tradition. Just like his life now, past and present weaving together into something stronger than either alone. Rachel appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Jenkins? Got another customer asking about strange engine noises. Would you maybe want to take a look?" Harold thought about his daughter waiting at the airport, about 3 excited girls getting out of school soon, about a grandson he was finally going to meet, about family found and family restored, all because of one rainy night and a broken-down car. "Not today," he said. "Got more important work waiting." He drove home slowly, conserving energy for the afternoon ahead. The elementary school passed on his right, its playground empty now but still echoing with morning laughter. His chest felt full, not with pain this time, but with something that felt a lot like purpose. The diner where Lisa worked came into view. She waved from behind the counter, her smile visible even through the window. A "Help Wanted" sign hung in the corner, and Harold made a mental note to tell Rachel about it. Good people should know about other good people. His house looked different now, less a museum of memories, more a living space. Drawings covered his refrigerator, 3 distinct styles mixing together. Tommy's school picture had joined them, sent ahead by Sarah weeks ago. Harold showered and changed, then sat in his recliner to rest before the airport run. Trinity's rabbit still kept watch from the side table, joined now by a small photo album Sarah had brought. His life in pictures, from young mechanic to father to whatever he was becoming now. The last photo showed all of them at his welcome home party. Harold in his chair, surrounded by 3 grinning girls, Lisa standing proud behind them, Sarah perched on the couch arm. Family, in all its beautiful, complicated forms. His phone buzzed again. A photo from Sarah. Tommy sleeping on the airport shuttle, his Yankees cap crooked on his head. "He can't wait to meet his grandpa properly," the text read. Harold touched his chest, feeling his heart beat steady and strong. 2 months ago, he'd been a lonely old man watching life pass by from a gas station parking lot. Now he was picking up his grandson to meet his new cousins for ice cream. Life had a way of coming full circle, he thought. Sometimes you just needed a broken alternator to show you the way home. He closed his eyes, resting until it was time to go. Outside, the world kept turning. Cars needed fixing, families needed finding, love needed room to grow. And Harold Jenkins, retired mechanic and newly minted grandfather, finally had all the tools he needed for the job.